Okay, hello again and welcome to my home here in New Zealand. I have a big smile on my face because we are no longer in lockdown here in New Zealand. That doesn't mean that our fight against the virus is over, but some restrictions have been lifted. So that's good news. I hope wherever you're watching that the news is getting better for you too. But one thing which has been a highlight for me has been doing these webinars during lockdown, and there are plenty more to come. Today, as you may have seen, the focus is going to be on listening. So this is something which is going to be helpful for every IELTS candidate. What I'm going to do with these listening webinars is break them into 4. So the listening test for, well, there is only one listening test basically for academic or general training students. That listening test has 4 parts. So we're going to cover each part of the listening test in each of the 4 webinars, which will be for listening. If this is the first time you're watching, my name is Greg. I've been an IELTS teacher for a couple of years now and an English teacher for 15. So most of that time I spent in South Korea, but I'm very happy to be back here in the country of my birth, which is New Zealand. As I mentioned, this is one of many webinars which I have been doing. We started off by looking at writing task 2, then we moved on to some grammar, then the last one was on reading. Today is the first one on listening. So as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the GRAID Facebook page. So I do have my phone next to me. Hopefully I'll see any messages that you do send or any questions that you do ask. I'm going to take you over now to the GRAID site itself. We're going to use this platform to practice. Again, I use the word practice because it's not an authentic test, but it's a great way to practice for your IELTS listening test. So let's go across to the GRAID page. Okay, so this is the landing page or the dashboard for the GRAID website. And we can see we have writing, reading, speaking, and down the bottom on the left, listening. I'm going to click on the tests and we're going to go through this one here. So one thing that it does tell you is that the test is 40 minutes. Give or take really, because each IELTS listening test is quite unique. Sometimes there might be a slight difference in the length of the listening tracks themselves. But as I mentioned, with the reading tests, you have to transfer all your answers from your question paper to your answer paper during the 60 minutes that you get for the reading test. With this listening test, and this is really important to remember, I suggest you just scribble down your answers while you listen on your question paper, because you have those 10 minutes that you can use at the end of the test to transfer your answers onto your answer sheet. That's really important to remember. And just to remember also that that isn't the case with the reading test. So as I said, the listening test is the same for both academic and general training students. So whichever one you're preparing for, whichever test, this is going to be helpful for you both. Now, I'm a cheat because I have the script here in front of me, but the reason I have the script is because when we practice together for this, I'm going to be stopping the audio and just explaining some of the answers. So you can imagine this, like imagine I'm doing the test, but I can tell the examiner to stop, and rather than just play the audio back, I might repeat back parts of the script just to help you understand. So this is practice, but I thought it might be more useful for me to give you some insight into the test itself. Let's start. Now, what happens here is we jump to question 1. If you're using the GRAID site itself, you'll see the listening test up here. So we can press start and it'll play. But just to remind you, this is practice and we're going to try and make this as authentic as possible. You will have some time before you actually listen to the testable part of the listening track. So that time before the listening track begins is so important. that's the time where you really need to make as many predictions as possible. This concept of predictions, I think it's really key to doing well on any listening tests. And of course, that applies to the IELTS test as well. So to give you an idea of what I mean, let's listen to the introduction, which is a pretty standard one, and it's the type that you would expect to hear on the IELTS test itself. So let's listen.
Practice test 3. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Write all of your answers on the test pages. Section 1. You will hear a man checking into a hotel.
Now, that's really the first important part of the briefing at the beginning of the listening test that applies to section 1. Now, you've probably heard the speaker say that during section 1, you will hear a man checking into a hotel. I know that some test takers kind of switch off when they're hearing these instructions, but that is a really important piece of information. That gives us the context for this particular listening section. So it's going to be about a man checking into a hotel. So that's going to give us an idea of the types of words that we might hear. Now, obviously you are under time pressures during the IELTS test itself, but when you're practicing, I don't think it hurts just to stop for a little while and just think about some of the vocabulary that you might hear. So I'm doing this myself. If I were to check into a hotel, I'm probably going to use words like room, how many days, luggage, maybe baggage fees, or these are the kinds of words that we might hear. So let's listen on.
First, you have time to look at questions 1 to 8.
Now, I'm going to show you how this would work in the actual test. What I'm going to do is when we hear the speaker again, I'm going to stop. But what I want you to do at this point, and I know you've already probably read question 1, I'm just going to scroll down the questions. When we hear the speaker start again, I'm going to press stop. So let's see how much information you can take in from the listening test during this break. You're going to get a slight break, some time to preview the questions. So see if you can do this.
You will see that there is an example that has been done for you.
Okay, not a lot of time. On the actual test, you may be lucky, you may get a longer break, but basically, you just need to read as many of these questions and make as many predictions as you can before you start listening to the actual listening track itself that you're tested on. But this is practice, and we're not going to rush through this. In fact, probably likely that these listening webinars aren't going to last as long as some of the other ones. So we have time to really analyze these questions. And again, what's the key? It's making predictions. So let's have a look at question 1. And I want to explain what I mean by making a prediction. Now, maybe I can even annotate some answers here. Actually, that won't work. If I start writing on the screen, when I scroll down, I'm going to be left with a whole lot of answers. So you have to rely on listening to me. Maybe that's going to practice your listening skills as well. But here we're told for the questions that we have to fill in the blanks with no more than 3 words. That's a really important instruction. It's probably likely that you're going to be dictating these words exactly as you hear them. But it does say, it actually doesn't say anything about the words from the listening, right? So perhaps you may be able to transform some of the grammar, but if at all possible, I would just be dictating, which means writing down what you hear. So we're told that the first answer is for a family name, right? Now, we're told that the first name is Larry, so that is our keyword. So we're listening for Larry, and if it's a Western name, this is where you can use your general knowledge. If it's a Western name, usually for Westerners, the family name is after the first name, right? So I wouldn't go as far as to make a prediction for the family name. And in the IELTS test, this is a very common question, especially in section 1. You may be asked, well, you quite likely will be asked to dictate someone's name. So that means they will spell the name for you, right? So it's probably not going to be as easy to spell as something like Smith. But let's listen on. Anyway, we're going to listen for his family name. And for question 2, this is an easier one. I think this is just going to be a yes/no answer, right? So how many additional guesses? But in terms of the preview or the prediction, I would be thinking about what kind of phrases might be associated with this question, right? So maybe the clerk at the front desk, because we know that there's a man checking in. Maybe the hotel clerk might say, do you have any additional guests, or will there be anyone staying with you? This is what I mean by a prediction. It's literally predicting what you think you're going to hear. So I do have a question here, and the question is there any example in actual tests nowadays? Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that question, but perhaps if I were to say again that for question 1, when you have to dictate a family name, that is a very common task that you're asked to perform on the IELTS listening section 1. So quite often you might have to dictate someone's family name. So I hope that answers your question. But I can tell you that these practice tests that are on the GRAID site are quite reflective of the actual tests that you're going to take on test day. What's different, obviously, is the interface. A lot of you are going to take a paper-based test, but IELTS is also offered online in some cases too. Okay, so if I haven't answered your question correctly, perhaps you might be able to expand upon that further, and I'll be happy to answer your question or any other question. So we're told here we're asked to fill in the blank for the room type. Now again, my prediction is it's most likely going to be one of the words that we're given. So perhaps an easier question. The length of stay. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to hear the words length of stay in the listening track, but you might want to think about this at home. What might this be phrased as? Perhaps the clerk might ask, how long do you intend to stay? Or how long will you stay? How many nights are you checking in for? So something like that. It's all about guessing what you're going to hear. Passport number. So my prediction is there aren't many other ways of saying passport number. So it's quite likely that we're going to hear the word passport. So when we hear that word, that's going to be the key to answer that question. Payment method. Again, what kind of phrase do you think you're likely to hear when you're checking in at a hotel? Will it be something like, and how are you paying today, sir? Right? Or how are you paying? Well, Larry is a sir, so maybe they're going to use sir. Total cost. So again, that's something that the clerk is likely to say. That will be, or the cost today is, da, 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 da. And question 8, we're only going to focus on the first 8 questions for now. The room number, again, very similar to the reading tests. We're also predicting, are there other ways that could be paraphrased? Something like room number, I can't think of many other ways of saying room number. So my prediction is we're very likely to hear those 2 words. And that is what I mean by predictions. So as we progress through these questions, I'm going to stop on the audio and I'll review anything. You might want to tell me if there's something that you didn't catch, and I can use the script to review. So Oh, one other question I have. Are the answers in sequence? Well, yes, I can never predict a test in the future, but of all the IELTS tests I've seen, I am yet to come across an IELTS test where the listening questions were not ordered in the same sequence as the listening tracks. So I think that would be a very difficult test if they were not. Let's listen on.
On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first. Good afternoon, sir.
So just to clarify, this is a feature of every IELTS test that I've heard, listening test. You are given an example, right? It's like a warm-up, just to, perhaps it'll help you become familiar with the different accents that you might hear. In terms of the accents, the main ones that you're likely to encounter are British, American. In this case, you can hear an Australian speaker. Sometimes you might hear my accent, which is a New Zealand accent. Those are the four main ones that you're likely to encounter. But I would say that British is the one that I've come across most often. But in this case, we're hearing two Australians speak.
How can I help you?
Good afternoon. I'm hoping to book a room.
Most certainly. Can I start with your family name, please, sir?
Yes, it's O'Shaughnessy.
Mr. O'Shaughnessy, I may need you to spell that for me.
Of course. O.
Ooh, have I skipped over the example? Okay, sorry about that. What I'll do is I will go back to the start and we'll listen.
Apostrophe S.
First, you have time to look at questions. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you.
Okay, so in this case, sorry, that's where I got confused. In this case, the example is written, right? So
on this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Okay, I should just add that in many cases, the example will actually be played for you during the test. For this practice one, it's not. That's why I was confused. So from here on is the beginning of the test. I'm sorry if that confused you. Yes, and that's what somebody has just asked. A lot of the IELTS tests will, I can't think of one where an example was not actually played. Maybe for this practice test, they've skipped it out. But yeah, I will start again from the beginning of the listening test, the listening track. So no example is played in this case, right?
Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?
Good afternoon. I'm hoping to book a room.
Most certainly. Can I start with your family name, please, sir?
Yes, it's O'Shaughnessy.
Okay, so remember this is the listening test proper. We didn't get an example played for us, which you will probably get in the actual test. For this practice test though, we're straight in to the listening test and we have heard our first keyword, family name. In fact, this was quite clear. The receptionist said, "Can I start with your family name, please, sir?" Right? So when you hear those two phrases, I would have your pencil ready. At home, you may actually want to write down some of the answers. But as I mentioned, with family names, it's likely to be dictated. So let's listen to the dictation.
Mr. O'Shaughnessy, I may need you to spell that for me.
Of course. O apostrophe S H A U G H N E S S Y.
Now, I'm lazy and I've just got the answers, so I'm not going to dictate everything down with a pencil. For some of you at home, you may be quite confused by this name. The name is O'Shaughnessy. And one thing I have noticed about IELTS tests is the kind of family names which are used as examples can be from a wide range of different cultural backgrounds. O'Shaughnessy is actually an Irish name, but I've actually heard Indian names being given as examples, all different kinds of names. They're not always your English names that you might expect on an English test, right? So in fact, I've never come across Smith, for example. Let's spell O'Shaughnessy just so that you can check at home. So we were told that it was O apostrophe, this one here, S-H-A-U-G-H-N-E-S-S-Y. So some Irish family names can be quite difficult to spell. So some of the names on the IELTS test can be difficult to spell too. That's why they are usually dictated for you. Okay, and just to reiterate or to tell you again, we're expecting to hear these in sequence. So let's continue.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shaughnessy. And could I have your first name, please?
Sure, it's Larry.
Section 1. Good afternoon, sir. How can I help?
Oh my goodness. What am I doing? So that was the example. Sorry, that's a quite lengthy example. I thought that was the whole, I thought that was the start of the listening track. So yes, there you go. There's the example played for you, just like you would get in the test. So I'm going to skip over that part. So that was quite a lengthy example.
Help you?
Good afternoon. I'm hoping to book a room.
Most certainly. Can I start with your family name, please, sir?
Yes, it's O'Shaughnessy.
Mr. O'Shaughnessy, I may need you to spell that for me.
Of course. O''SHAUGHNESSY.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
Okay, so we're back up to where we were before. So yes, this practice test, it does give you the example as you would expect in the test. Sorry to confuse you there.
And could I have your first name, please?
Sure, it's Larry.
Okay, and how many nights will you be staying?
Okay, how many nights will you be staying? So what we're looking for here, and this is where it's quite difficult, you need to be scanning the question paper and listening at the same time. This is one deficiency with any listening tests really, is that it's not quite just a listening test, is it? You're also engaging your reading skills. But for most examiners, it's really, there aren't too many other ways. So you are going to have to read and listen at the same time. Let's continue and see if we can find any information about additional guests.
Well, I know I will definitely stay for 2 nights, and I may need a room for a few extra nights, but I'm not sure about that yet. So can I book a room for 2 nights for now?
Of course. And is the room just for you?
Okay, here is our key. The receptionist asks Mr. O'Shaughnessy, and is the room just for you, right? So here is an example where what you're hearing in the listening track is different from the words which are listed on the question paper. So it's listening comprehension, right? So you're not always going to get something simple like family name here. Additional guest has been represented in the phrase or the question, and is the room just for you? So let's listen.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so yes, it is. So are there any additional guests? And obviously it's just for him, so there are no additional guests. And here on the test paper, you're going to be scanning down, looking at number 3 and reminding yourself that the next bit of information we're looking for is room type. Now, it's highly likely that it's going to be one of those 3 options, but we need to check.
Okay, well, we have 3 choices. There is our deluxe suite, which is $295 a night.
Now, perhaps if you have very good listening skills, you just heard the word deluxe suite. Now, in the test, a lot of you, or some candidates might quickly be writing down the answer deluxe. This is where you have to be careful, because not always the first word that you hear on the IELTS test is the answer, right? So it is a listening test. They really are testing your listening comprehension. So let's check to make sure that there aren't other things discussed.
There is our executive room, which is $225 a night. And there is our standard room for $150 a night.
Okay, so here the receptionist is speaking, which is an important fact as well. And the receptionist has listed the 3 different types of rooms, the deluxe suite, the executive room, and the standard room. Now, what was quite tricky is that they're in a different order that they're listed on the question paper. So definitely not the easiest question here. Let's see what Larry, the guest, is going to say.
Well, my boss has given me an accommodation allowance for $250 a night, so I'd like to book an executive room for 2 nights.
Okay, so we had some background information about the different costs. I don't think you absolutely need to remember that, but that will give you some guidance. Larry only has $250 to spend a night, which means the deluxe suite, $295, is too expensive anyway. So he definitely will book the executive suite. Okay, so we're moving on to number 4. Length of stay. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to hear those same words.
Okay, now you mentioned that you only want to book the room for 2 nights for now. Is that correct?
Well, I think I might actually take a room for 3 nights.
Now, again, you're going to hear these different things all the time. So I'm going to repeat this back. So the receptionist said, now, you mentioned that you only want to book the room for 2 nights now. Is that correct? Right. So there's the repeat information about booking a room for 2 nights. And this happens in IELTS often. Information is corrected in some cases. Larry then says, well, I think I might actually take the room for 3 nights, right? But I would like to book a standard room for 3 nights. That'll be the same price as an executive room for 2 nights, won't it? So it looks like he's going to take he's going to stay for 3 nights, which also means we need to go back and change our answer here. So a particularly tricky one, I think. So that element of self-correcting, or that concept of the speakers correcting previous information, is quite common. And this is really how you're tested. You know, you're really tested on this, on the IELTS listening test. So let's move on to number 5, passport number. Hopefully that's going to be a simple one for us. My prediction here is maybe the hotel's going to need some kind of ID. So that might be another keyword to listen out for.
But I would like to book a standard room for 3 nights. That'll be the same price as an executive room for 2 nights, won't it?
That's correct. I just need some identification to confirm the booking. Do you have your passport or driver's license?
Okay, so as I predicted, he's going to ask, or the receptionist is asking for some ID, and we heard him mention the word passport.
Sure, here is my passport.
Thank you. I'll just take a note of your passport number.
Okay, so the passport number, and now again, we have one where it's been dictated. So
I'll just take a note of your passport number. MN4577.
okay, another real test which often pops up on the IELTS listening test. I'm going to write the answer for you in case you are unsure. So you're being tested, essentially indirectly they're testing your pronunciation, because you have some native speakers modeling native pronunciations. So you need to pick up on the sounds correctly, right? So the passport number, even though it has letters in it, but the 2 letters at the start were MN, right? So MN 4577, right? So you're often going to get tested on sounds in English which are quite similar to each other. That's part of the test. So there we have it, the passport number. Then payment method. Again, some of the types of predictions, the phrases we might hear, and how will you be paying perhaps. So you might want to think of some predictions at home while you're listening to this test too.
Thank you, Mr. Larry.
It's Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
My mistake, sir. I apologize for that.
No problems.
And how would you like to pay today, Mr. O'Shaughnessy?
Okay, so I think in this case, quite lucky, we even hear in a different part of speech, payment, pay. Pay is the verb, payment is the noun. But obviously, we need to prick up our ears because the answer is coming.
I have my company credit card here.
Okay, payment method. So again, as I mentioned, I would just be dictating what I hear. I would not try to change the words unless I really think I have to. So question 7, we're looking for the cost. Now, while you probably can't guess the cost unless you have a really good memory, we're going to have, if you can remember how much the standard room was for each night, that's going to help you. But if you can't, hopefully we're going to get given this information again. But what you could do is just think of a ballpark figure, which is an English idiom, and it means something which is approximate, right? So I doubt it's going to be, you know, $3,000 or $4,000 a night, or for the total stay. So it's probably going to be in the hundreds, just as a ballpark figure.
Thank you. So to confirm, that will be a standard room for 3 nights.
That is correct.
Now, here you're quite lucky. So if you weren't able to get the answer before for the type of room, you're told again, right? So that's not always going to be the case in every IELTS test, but here we're lucky, we're told the answer again for question 3. Remember though, we're on to question 7, and what is the cost?
Thank you.
Okay, that will be a total of $450.
Okay, and we're told that it is $450. Some of you may have seen me miss out the $sign. That's because I don't need it. We have the $sign here, so we just have to write in the numerals. Okay, so the last one, the room number, and again, I consider the easier questions the types where you're given words on the test paper which are unlikely to be paraphrased. So it's quite likely that we're going to hear those 2 words, room and number.
Now, Mr. O'Shaughnessy, the check-in time is actually 2 p.m. and it's only 1:15 p.m. now. However, please let me check with housekeeping, as there may be a room available for you right away.
There's no need for that.
Now, that might confuse some listeners because what we heard there is some numbers, but those numbers were not room numbers, those were times, right? So we heard some numbers there, but those were numbers used to give times of the day. So we need to keep listening for the room number.
We'll actually need to head out, but could I leave my luggage with you, and could someone take it up to the room for me?
Most certainly. So I will process your credit card payment now.
Now, if you did miss the payment method, there's a final reminder. Again, you're not always going to get those reminders on the actual test. I think this time we're a little lucky, but it's always good if you do get those reminders. So in this case, we were told that it's a credit card payment. So we can confirm question 6 if you did miss out. So.
Okay, that's all done. Now your room number is 637.
736?
Now, here is another example of some corrections, right? So the receptionist said, now your room number is 637. Larry replied, 736. Obviously, he didn't hear the room number carefully. And then the receptionist is going to correct him.
No, it's 637.
Okay, so again, this is something which happens quite often on the IELTS listening tests. You'll hear 2 speakers, and section 1 is always a dialogue, which means there are 2 speakers. Quite often there'll be corrections between them, so you have to listen so carefully.
So your luggage will be taken to your room straight away.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 9 to 10.
Okay, this is another feature of the sections. Again, there are 4 sections on the IELTS listening test, but you often get the sections broken up, right? So here we are tested on the first 8 questions of 10. Then we have a little bit more time to go ahead and read the next 2 questions. I'm not going to play on at the moment. I'm just going to preview the questions for you because this is practice. So here we have the same question type, no more than 3 words, and we're being asked to complete a sentence. The executive and deluxe suites both have a large bed and a. Now, this is important because we have some grammar hints, right? So we know that when we have the article a, somewhere in this blank, there must be a noun, right? But we also know that the next word is going to begin with a consonant sound, right? So like b, p, t, right? It won't begin with a vowel sound because the next sound, not spelling, the next sound preceding the article a is always going to be a consonant sound, right? So g, z, right? Sounds like that. But it could be an adjective because it could be one word, two words, or three words, right? So you might want to make a prediction. What would you expect to find inside an executive or a deluxe suite, right? And then for question 10, the deluxe suites are on the of the hotel. So again, this is where I would be using the grammar clues to help you answer this. Preposition on could be used for floors, right? So it could be on the first floor, second floor, like this, right? So use those grammar hints to help you answer the questions on the listening test as well. Let's see what we can do. So you're not hearing anything at the moment because this is that little pause that we get given just to break up the section.
Now listen and answer questions.
So it's usually about that length of time as well. I would say anywhere between 20 and 30 seconds pause just to give you a little bit more time to read ahead for the remaining questions, which in this case, so questions 9 and 10, we've already had a look at those. And again, we're looking for the answer. The executive and deluxe suites both have a large bed and a, right?
Questions 9 to 10.
That's right. But just out of curiosity, what are the main differences between the rooms?
Okay, so Larry, Mr. O'Shaughnessy, has asked about the main differences between the rooms. So perhaps we're going to get a comparison or some comparisons between the rooms here, and we might have our answer coming up soon.
Well, of course, the deluxe suite is bigger than the executive room, and the executive room is larger than the standard room. The same goes for the size of the beds. Our deluxe rooms and our executives also have baths.
Okay, now the order of the words are different in the listening track to what they are on the question paper. I'm going to repeat back what the receptionist just said, right? So he said, our deluxe rooms and executives also have baths, right? So here I'm going to have to transform the grammar, right? So I can't say baths because that will not be grammatically correct. So we are told in these instructions that we do not have to list the words exactly as they are spoken. It's more important, well, if you want to get this question correct, you need to be grammatically correct. So here I need to transform bath, which was singular in the listening, to plural, baths, right? Sorry, bath, right? So that is the correct answer. So I'm confusing myself. Just to repeat, our deluxe rooms and executives also have baths, right? So that's how we would say that naturally, using the plural. But then when we write it on the test paper, we have to say singular because we have an article, right? So a little tricky, that one, but that's where you need to use those grammar clues to make sure you get the right answer. And again, the deluxe suites are on the. Now, again, using some general knowledge, you can probably make a prediction here. Before I was giving examples about being on the first or second floor, but using general knowledge, the deluxe suites, which mean the more expensive ones, well, I would expect those to be near the top of the hotel.
The bath in the deluxe suite is bigger. Also, all deluxe suites occupy the top 3 floors of the hotel.
Okay, so here's our answer. The deluxe suites are on the top 3 floors. Okay, So I'm quite confident with all of these answers. If I've made any mistakes, I'll soon find out, but I think we have all the answers here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll play the rest of the listening track just to give you an idea, but there isn't too much more to come.
And offer fantastic views over the city. However, all of our rooms are fully serviced, so I'm sure you will be comfortable in whichever room you choose.
And what size is the bed in the standard room?
All our standard rooms have queen-size beds. If you need additional beds, they can be arranged also.
No, there is no need for that. My boss likes it when I save him money, and I'll probably need a third night here in Brisbane. So a standard room for 3 nights sounds good.
That's great. Now can I organise you a taxi?
Thank you, that would be great. I need to go to Brisbane City Hall.
Not a problem, Mr. O'Shaughnessy. Please follow Owen and your taxi should be here shortly.
Thank you for your help.
You're most welcome.
Okay, so a quite authentic dialogue that you would expect to hear between a guest checking in a hotel and a hotel receptionist. That's where the listening track finishes, but I just want to show you what we would expect the speaker in the IELTS test to say on the recording itself. So let's listen. We have the narrator here again.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Okay, so what he said obviously is that you have half a minute to check your answers. There are 2 things you could do in that time. Well, actually, there are many things you could do, but the 2 things you would consider doing are checking your spelling. But I think you would be better served to go ahead and start making predictions for the questions that you're going to get in the next section, which is section 2. Now, section 2 we're going to look at on Thursday's webinar. So, but if this was the actual test, unless you were really unsure about the spelling, you might want to check it quickly, but I would be more inclined, I would go straight ahead and start predicting the answers that or making predictions for section 2, right? Because that's something that you can't do at the end of the test. You can always check your spelling at the end of the test because you have those additional 10 minutes, right? So I have one more question here. It says, what happens if I only mention that they're on the top, but not the top 3 floors? Well, I would say that would be wrong, right? I see what you mean. So the question is, are on the top floors. This is where I'm going to put my teacher hat on, and I'm going to say that the top 3 floors are that's definitely a better answer. But I also know that sometimes the examiners on the IELTS tests will accept a variety of different answers in the listening test. You might be lucky, and perhaps that could be one of the answers that they would accept. But if you want to remove any doubt, then if you include the number 3, well, not the number, but if you write top 3 floors, I think that removes any doubt. But that's a really good question, and it does highlight the fact that sometimes there are alternative answers. So why don't we check our answers? As always, I hope I got them all right. And this is where we go back to finish. Oh, what happened? Number 4. Did I make us? What did I do? Okay, well, perhaps I had to write standard room. So that, yeah, but I would say in the test, if I just wrote standard, that would be acceptable. Perhaps this program is only accepting standard room. Sorry, it's question 4, isn't it? So, no, that would be unacceptable. So there's a good example for you. Question 4, I only put 3. That is definitely wrong, whether it's a computer program or the actual test. So that is absolutely my mistake. Probably too busy thinking ahead to question 5. But yeah, there's an example, a silly mistake. Obviously English is my first language, but I'm still prone, like anybody, to making errors on a listening test. So there's a really good example of an answer which is not acceptable, right? So to get that one right, I need to write 3 nights. Just to recap though, we had a great question. For question 10, somebody, a viewer, has asked, what if we only write top floors? You might be lucky with that one because it still actually makes grammatical sense. But if you wanted to remove any doubt, top 3 floors. So I want to take you back to the intro here, and I will recap. So yeah, you've asked again, would it be correct? So it may be. I mean, it really depends on the examiner. Sometimes they'll have a list of possible answers. In this case, it might be, but top 3 floors, I'm sure that would be the absolute best answer. So let's go back to the, where are we? I want to remind you of the schedule or the schedule for the rest of the week. So I can clear this. We're done for the listening today, but what I will do is tell you what's coming up. So today is Tuesday. So we have the webinars on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays, and they're always at 1:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, which here in New Zealand is 8 p.m. So what's going to happen is, as I mentioned at the start, we're going to go through this whole listening test. Listening tests are always in 4 parts. So we've done part 1 or section 1 today. On Thursday, we'll do section 2. On Sunday, we'll do section 3. And then next Tuesday, we'll finish off the test with section 4. Each section is a little different. And you can expect to hear different types of dialogues or sometimes monologues, which means one person speaking in the different sections. So today we did section 1, which is more an everyday dialogue, such as checking into a hotel. I hope wherever you're watching that you stay safe. If you have more questions, you can always add them to the Facebook page, the GRAID Facebook page after this finishes. I know some of you are probably watching this as a replay, but if you want to watch live again, then I look forward to seeing you on Thursday at 1:30 Indian Standard Time, or here in New Zealand, that is 8 p.m. Take care.